All right. We are
Because
live
we're
according
live.
to StreamYard. How's it going, Mike?
Going great. How was your week, Dan?
It was pretty good. We were just talking about before coming on air that it has been cold in our respective locations, but cold means very different things to different people. So it has been cold to me here, but it has not been cold for the general populations, I don't think.
I feel like it has been. I mean, that polar vortex hit the entire country. We were talking to Brian, who is their international operations guy, and he is down in Austin and was worried about freezing pipes because apparently they don't bury the pipes very deep down there, and it got down to like, I don't know, 15 degrees or something.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so they bury them like 6 feet down here, but we still have water mains break, and boy, that's a job. The Madison water and power, I don't know, water utility, Madison water utility guys and gals out there like in the middle of the night with floodlights and water flooding down the street, and it's 10 below zero, and it's just like, oh, thank God they know what they're doing. That's a hard job though.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I could do it. We had a when we were visiting St. Louis recently, some of our friends lived there, and they just bought a house. It was like their first house, and when we were there, it was -4, and their furnace went out, and we had like a similar kind of thing where we were like, "Get all the water out of the pipes," because that can get really, really dicey pretty quick. So, but yeah, I'm glad you're surviving the much colder weather than I have. And it seems like you're doing it better than I am with the currently 46-degree temps here. So
Yeah, but you want that temperature dip because then when it goes back up, you appreciate it more. Like the sweet ain't as sweet without the bitter, that saying.
right, right. We're gonna be up in the 60s next week, so I'll be all set at that point.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, Mike, what have you been working on this week?
Testing, and more testing. So we're working on another release of our firmware SDK, which is glomming together all of the different platform support all into one, which is awesome. And the thing that we didn't have finished is the hardware in the loop testing for all of the samples. It's in the Zephyr SDK, but we want it in this SDK as well. And so working on Pytest, right? Maybe it's not all in the Zephyr SDK. I'm not sure we're doing these, but this week it was OTA testing. So actually generating, on each PR, the sample that does over-the-air updates, and then having it be flashed onto a device, and then having that device get credentials, and then have a new release rolled out to it, and making sure that it's working every single time, watching it update. And so that was a ton of fun. And then the other one is certificate provisioning. Both of these interesting challenges because the hardware's somewhere else. Like basically the dev board's in the cloud somewhere, even though it's technically right here. But
Right.
yeah, and so dealing with GitHub Actions, getting it to build for Zephyr, and then Zephyr's test runner is called Twister, getting Twister to run, and then we use Pytest to run those things. And so like things like what port is that board on, and like what's the path to the tool that you need to use, and where did the device certificate that you just generated end up in the file system of the cloud runner, and that sort of stuff is all a fun, hairy challenge.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of like two testing frameworks there, Twister on the Zephyr side, and then Pytest. Are you primarily using Pytest to automate the parts of the test that are interacting with the REST API as an administrator would, or is that also interacting with the devices directly?
Both.
Okay.
So basically, the way that it works is Zephyr's set up so you can put sample.yaml files in your hierarchy of apps, and that tells it like what kind of tests to run, whether to build them only or to test them on devices, and what devices it can test on. And so Twister will go out and figure out, okay, here's all of the stuff that I need to compile. And then when it comes time to test, it'll say, here's all the stuff that I need to flash to devices. And I believe what happens is, as it's got an integration with Pytest, so it flashes the firmware to the devices, and then Pytest kicks off, or maybe Pytest kicks off, and the first step of that is it flashes to the devices. But basically, where the Pytest comes in, the device has the firmware on it, and you can get a shell, so you can get a like handle to the serial output of the device and like watch for what's coming on the serial output. And then started with Marcin, and then Sam really picked it up, and I've been getting into it too. We've written a Python wrapper of all of the API REST API functions for Golioth. So for instance, when we make a root certificate, we can use that to upload. And when we need to check if a device is connected, we can go and query that all the devices for a project and like basically confirm, one, on the device side, we see the serial reports, I'm connected to Golioth. And then two, we can go up to Golioth and be like, did that device actually connect? And then we know like we're getting what we should on both ends.
Gotcha. So on the device side, are you mostly just like analyzing strings that are, in log messages or things like that, or are you actually like querying state somehow across the UART?
I'm mostly analyzing log messages in order to get the sequencing stuff to go right. But for instance, like I yesterday had to figure out how to install MCU Manager on these inside of these Docker containers because you need to not use the Zephyr shell in order to write. You need to stop the Zephyr shell logging and then
Yeah.
use MCU Manager to write the certificates onto the device into the file system, and then you can turn on the logs again and reboot the device, and then you should see it actually come up and connect, and then the device, which wasn't on Golioth before, then appears. But for me, since I'm just starting to get comfortable with Pytest, it's really been cool because like this concept of harnesses. Have you used Pytest very much?
I've used it in the past, but it's been a bit.
So that feature where the harnesses have a like cleanup is very awesome. And because for instance, my naive way of like making a device, or actually what was I doing? I was making tags with our over-the-air updates. We want to make sure if we're running a bunch of concurrent tests that the rollout is only going to the current device under test. So I assign a blueprint to that device, and so it gets the right artifact. And then I also assign a tag, unique tag to that device, so the rollout only goes there. But then if I had a failure, it wouldn't clean up the device tags because I wasn't doing that in the harnesses. So I've since learned about that, and one of those very cool features of using someone else's like heartily tested framework to do your bidding.
Right. Have you run into any limitations with it so far?
It's always hardware is the thing that I think gets in the way. So like making sure that if you're like waiting to listen for a string and you miss that string, like that's not great. And like there's been some challenges that way, but I can't think of any real blockers. Like I said before, just like weird stuff like getting environment variables and like indirectly referenced environment variables in the Pytest is that I wasn't able to get that working. So I ended up like doing some weird like string concatenation in order to get around it. So you can always like figure out your way around it, but it can take a long time. When like I ran the certificate provisioning test great on locally using Twister. And that took, not that much time, but then it was like a full day of like figuring out that problem with MCU Manager on the, self-hosted runners, which are somewhat cloudy, even though they're right here. Getting that figured out, getting the paths figured out, getting the ports for the devices figured out. Like there's just this minutia that kind of eats away at you. But that was one of the more complicated like device things. And I think next time we do it, we can just copy that and be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the nice thing is that it pays off kind of in the long run, because a bunch of the kind of stuff you do in establishing the harnesses and interacting with the REST API and that sort of thing, right? Those are kind of like fixed costs for the most part. So as we add new tests and hardware and that sort of thing, I imagine the marginal costs will go down quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think if you think about the multiplier, it comes in several places. Like one is when we do release testing, like it is just a killer to have to do manual tests on every one of these, because you take all of the examples that we have and then all of the boards that we're continually testing for, and then you have to go and like build them, give them credentials, figure out if they're doing the thing that they're supposed to, like all manually, that's just a bad way to do it. So we take care of that. But then also when we have upstream improvements come up, like when we go to the next release of Nordics NRF Connect SDK, or we go to the next release of Zephyr, or we go next release of ESP IDF, we should be able to pretty quickly catch the breaking changes in there because we have all of these tests that test all of the services. And I think, it's so hard to see the road ahead because we're kind of in it right now. But
Right.
once we get this release cut, I think the next thing we're going to do is to go and test like every error state, every possible thing that the SDK can do should be getting regularly tested. And so that feels pretty cool to be getting closer to that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And from the I know Sam mentioned it today in our all hands, but from kind of like the cloud perspective, we're really appreciative of all this work as well because we have like unit tests, end-to-end tests, and then we do load testing and things like that. But I almost view the tests that y'all run as like fuzz testing, almost like production fuzz testing of our services. And Sam actually caught something this past weekend. Where one of our services wasn't behaving as he expected, and we were able to get a fix in really quickly. So I'm definitely excited for the breadth of testing and the frequency of testing to be increasing because that's going to help us get more solid on our side as well.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And another really big thing that I'm excited for, I know it's going to happen someday, but I want it to happen today, is I want to see customers take this testing framework because it's part of our open source SDK. And I want to see them testing their devices, the Golioth parts of their devices with it. I think that would feel like vindicating and a win. And like we really contributed to like leveling up their ability to like put a reliable product in the field, like even more than our service already does. So if you're listening and you're interested in doing this testing, come talk to us. Come devrel at Golioth.io and let's get your devices under test too.
That's awesome. Yeah, that kind of makes me think of I've worked on a few projects in the past that I would consider like distributions of software, and a lot of times you have like your conformance suite, and I almost wonder if like we have a set of kind of like automated tests that folks can run to say like, hey, you're using settings correctly, right? And this will actually call Golioth in your account and that sort of thing. That would be super neat.
Well, so that's what I was drowning in this week, although definitely head above water. So I feel good about that. But you've had a ton of really cool demos. What can you talk about of all the things that I've seen merge this week?
Yeah, well, things are going to merge probably right after this call, so I think I can go ahead and talk about them, and maybe this will be a good teaser for people to attend our Friday afternoon streams in the future. You can get early feature previews, but we have a number of things happening behind the scenes about how we think about our information architecture at Golioth, and from kind of like I feel like information architecture is really where engineering and product meet because it informs the features you're able to build. It informs your UX. It informs the complexity of different queries and things like that on the back end. So it's really important, I think, to get that right. And that's something I think we've been, I'd say, like refining perhaps over the last couple of months, and maybe refining our idea of what we want there. So as part of that, we've become more organization centric in the console and in our API in general. And basically what that means is all projects exist within an organization. Membership happens at an organization level, and then you do permissions for projects and other resources in that organization. And then as part of that, we have to change the way our console works because it's kind of built around that information architecture. And there's also some other good things which I will not divulge on this stream today that come along with updating this. But while doing some of the back end work to change our information architecture and refine it, this week I got to spend some time on the front end side of things, which is fun because it is very demoable, like you were saying earlier, and people see it a lot more as opposed to like changing your authorization logic, on the back end is probably harder. Well, I won't say it's harder. It requires at least as much concentration and focus and that sort of thing, and is a little less demoable. So did some changes in the console, and as part of that, also updated some of our branding, which I think is the part that probably pops a little bit more for folks. So I think I can probably show it off here. I'm actually just going to run it locally, so you all see a little bit of how the sausage is made here, and it'll be against a test environment. So let me go ahead and pull this up, and maybe I'll pull up. Let me get a new window here. I'll pull up our existing console so we can kind of compare and contrast here. All right. So let me jump over and I'll share my screen. Window, here we go. All right. Looks like that's coming through. So this is our existing console here. And I'm just looking at one of my test accounts. So I think there's a few things of note here. One, we've kind of felt for a while that we aren't maximizing space very well. So we do have some empty space in here, but we also have things like, a fairly large logo here that's taking up a lot of space. And we want to be able to kind of grow what we're showing in the console. So that's one of the things. Another, which Mike, you gave some really good feedback on this, as you typically do with our console because of your role in DevRel and working with this so frequently. The way this works here is you're shown your org and your project, and then potentially some breadcrumbs to the tab you're on or something like that. And what you can do is go in and switch your organization. I'll switch over to another one I have, and then within that organization, you can look at your different projects. So if you want to switch from, a project in one organization to a project in another, then you're at least doing 2 clicks. And it's also not super, intuitive that those would be required. Similarly, over on the account side, you have your organizations, which the only ones you can see here, you'll notice I have 2, as opposed to I think the 5 or so that were on the previous page, are the ones that I'm an owner of. And then I can see all the projects within them. And this is not, specifically tied to my account per se. These are organizations in which I'm an admin, but they're not necessarily things that I would update about my personal account. So homing them here under a personal account and doing the quotas and such as well is a little bit of a mismatch with our information architecture at this point. So jumping over to the new console, you can see we've got a bit of a branding change going on here. And Dylan did a lot of work for Dylan, our product manager here at Golioth, did a lot of work regarding updating some of the colors. Some of the feedback that we got was, our signature coral color is a little confusing to have as your primary action button because, it's red, which usually indicates that you're deleting something or removing something. So we've made some updates there. And actually, this isn't the final color that's going to go out. But you'll also see that we've got some new coloring up here at the top in the header. We've replaced our large logo with this smaller one. I think is also just a little more seamless in the console here experience. And the header stretches over the sidebar as opposed to the other way around at this point. Probably the largest part, though, is the new organization and project switcher. So instead of having these separate modals where you have to kind of move between them, we instead have a single switcher here that will give you all of your organizations. In my opinion, presented in a bit cleaner of a list here. You can also create a new organization from here. But as you hover over them, you can get access to each of the projects in each organization, if any exist. Some of these, I believe, like this one, for example, I haven't created any projects. Another thing to note is that we'll have the create project and settings for each organization. But if you are just a member of an organization, you're not an admin, such as this one, I'll just have access to my project here. I'm not able to access the settings.
The org settings.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then project settings individually, you would access in the context of being in that project.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great switcher. One of the issues I was having is like somebody on the team owned a project that we needed to get to, and like we're trying to add someone. We're like, I can't find it in all of my orgs. But now the ability to like go down and hover over them and see that is greatly improved.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I agree as well, as someone who has, as we can see here in this test environment, many different orgs. And I have more than this on other accounts from testing. So it can be very hard to navigate across them. The other new thing here is the organization settings page. So if you go to your org settings, you can now view some of those things that used to be under your account. You can view them under the organization. So get a summary of the tier and your ownership. And other details. And then we have our quotas here for this organization. You'll notice that individual project tiers are not shown here. And there is a reason for that, but we're not going to talk about that today. So, but yeah, this is kind of the new structure of things, and we should be rolling this out pretty soon.
Yeah, join us in the next couple of weeks of live streams for the preview of that part of it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, this looks awesome. I really like the new styling. The coral, sometimes the coral text on white background has been rough, but I just got to put in a quick plug because I'm holding out hope that we'll have a dark mode in the future, because I do live my computer life in dark mode.
I do too. I know we have lots of viewpoints represented internally about dark mode or light mode. I am also a dark mode user typically, so I'm really excited to get that going. We're also going to have I don't know if this is obvious from seeing some of my work in the front end, but I do not have a background in design or front end engineering, but I do like to dabble in it. But we are going to have some folks coming in who have more of a background, I guess, let's say, in that. So I'm sure
or a foreground, maybe.
Right. Or the difference is they would know the difference between a foreground and a background. But yeah, no, I'm sure we'll get the dark mode requests will start rolling in. So but yeah, we've got like a little preview of dark mode with our header now. But so yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on. I don't know. I think most other things I can't divulge here, unfortunately. So but soon,
how are your how are your personal projects going? You've got anything coming down the pipeline there?
I do. I am eternally not having enough time, in my opinion, to work on things. So some of them are stagnating, but I have one large project that I've been working on, and involves lots of other people, I'll say. And I'll be launching that in February. So I'm getting quite excited for that. Also been doing some front end work for kind of a site for that project. But I also am not going to divulge all the information.
I'm in the know on this one, and I'm excited for the announcement because I think it's a really cool idea, and I think everyone will be as well. Let's see, hobby projects. We took our closet, like we live in like a 1960s ranch house, like it's not very glamorous, but we just had like one hanging bar with a shelf above it in our closet for the last like 12 years, and actually, boy, it's been like 14 years now. That's crazy. We ripped that out over the weekend and put in like a closet organizer system that like divides it out. But it was super snowy over the weekend, and I spent like a lot of time removing snow. And so we started the project a day later, and I ran out of time. And so it's everything except for that we have 4 hanging bars now, and like one more hanging bar needs to be like cut and drilled and put on there. I just like cannot find the time at all. I also got orchestra going on the other side, but I am looking forward to doing some electronics projects in the future that will be involving code and Golioth. So more on that later.
Yeah, well, I'll look forward to those. I know a number of us also submitted talks for Zephyr Developer Summit this week, which we were quite well. Actually, I think you were on the ball and got yours submitted in a timely manner, perhaps. But some of us were very fortunate that there was an extension on the deadline. I may have been soliciting feedback on my proposal around 11 p.m. that night. But
oh, you got to tease the topic, because I knew your other topic was the soldering iron, right?
yep. Mm-hmm.
So, but you
Yeah.
threw that one out and went with something else?
Yeah, so I wrote the proposal for the running Zephyr on my soldering iron, and I just didn't feel like it was. I thought it was interesting, but it wasn't as compelling as I thought maybe this other one could be. So the talk that I did submit is perhaps, I think, more interesting to folks who may be at Zephyr Developer Summit, and that's about using WebAssembly with Zephyr. So actually, on one of our Friday afternoon streams a while back, I kind of showed using WebAssembly micro runtime and running WASM modules and some of the benefits of doing that. So I think it's going to be more of a focus on kind of like, this is the state of WebAssembly on microcontrollers. This is how things work with Zephyr. These are some recent improvements, such as making Whammer be able to be included in Zephyr applications as a module. So like there's small things like that, but also starting to get folks maybe involved in development of the specification. It's still a fairly early specification, and there are for example, extensions to the WebAssembly system interface that are proposed for things like SPI and I2C and things like that. And they are in very, very, very nascent stages. And I think, folks who work on Zephyr would be just great to get feedback on those and, help make sure that they land in a good place.
Like a far future tech type of talk, like it's coming.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll say it is the distance in the future is dependent on how excited folks are to participate. So maybe it'll be also kind of like a call to action in some ways.
Yeah, so we must have had like at least 4 people put in talks. I know Sam and Chris both put in talks. I'm pretty excited. Sam's looks very interesting, and Chris's let's see, Chris was on the manufacturing, like getting the manufacturing with Zephyr is cool. I put in one which is kind of piggybacking on John's coattails. Jonathan Berry, our founder, figured out how to do code spaces, GitHub code spaces for like a development environment for Zephyr, which we've now moved our training to that. So like our next training session, which is coming up on Wednesday, is going to be the first one that uses that. And we didn't talk about it last week, did we?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, I don't think so. So it's very cool. Like if you go to the Zephyr training repo on the Golioth org on GitHub and go to where you'd normally check out code, there's a tab that says code spaces and a big button that says open in code spaces. And you basically get a VS Code window that has the Zephyr toolchain, the Zephyr tree, and the repo of that code already installed, and you can immediately start compiling the sample applications. The only hitch, and with the same one with our previous training, is the binary is then in the cloud and not on the computer that's connected through USB to your device. So you do have to have this intermediate step of like downloading the compile binary and flashing it to the device. But as far as like, I don't think, we originally tried with our training getting people to install locally, and training shouldn't be about installing tool chains because that sucks.
Right.
It's just a boring thing. So we're excited for that. And I think, I would like long term to be able to have like the samples that are in our SDK built through the same way, so that if someone is like validating Golioth as a service, they could get up and running very quickly. The problem that you run into though is like, Zephyr supports a whole bunch of different boards, and you're going to need a way to flash that binary onto the board, and that can be very different from board to board. It's one of the things that West Meta tool handles pretty well, is like knowing how each board needs to be flashed. So there's a little messy middle in there, but I think starting with the training, and we'll be adding training modules to kind of include more like how to use the Golioth APIs, and like how, maybe some best practices in standing up your fleet and things that we, patterns that we continually see people using in IoT. We'll be adding that to our trainings, but I think for now, the compiling in the cloud and running locally is just super slick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'm planning to stop by that training because I haven't actually tried out the code spaces integration. I'm definitely really excited for it. And I think also, I'm always thinking of it from the perspective. Usually, we have firmware folks or potentially hardware folks, I think, that come to our trainings. But I'm always thinking of it kind of from the other side, folks that may not have that experience, and using something like GitHub Codespaces is going to be way more familiar to folks that have worked in the cloud world and that sort of thing. So I think there may be benefits on that side as well, if we get some of those folks in there. So and I also know GitHub loves to promote Codespaces, so we can probably piggyback on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I have not used it before. This is the first time using it, but like it is not hard. Like what I mean, come on, John got it set up so that it was run, like building and like there it's there, it just needs to be configured. So like I didn't really do much on it. But when you go look at it, there's like one dev container folder, I think, in the repo, and it's got like 23 lines of code in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all that you need. Well, I keep, we just build on all these layers.
Right.
So
right.
there's also the containers, the like minimal Golioth containers that Jonathan and you set up to build. They're available in registries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually using those to get like the compiler, what do they call it? The SDK NG.
Mm-hmm.
It's the tool chains for Zephyr. I stumble on the nomenclature there every time. But to make sure that that's in place, and so we pull in that container and then we build everything else on top of it, and it's just simple.
Yeah, no, it does seem really clean. Also, I also stumble on the NG. Was it last week? I can't remember if this was on the stream or in Slack, but Sam
It was in Slack.
Okay, yeah, Sam told me, or told the company, I guess, I think it was I who was having trouble with why it was called SDK NG, and he informed me that it was based on cross tool NG, and then was NG for new generation or next? I think it was next generation.
Next generation,
yeah.
It might have been on the stream. Honestly, I can't believe we did a stream a week ago. It seems like it was a month ago at this point.
I think we skipped last week. I think it was.
Oh, did we? Okay,
2 weeks ago. Yeah, because
okay, all right,
I was
that's
traveling.
fine.
Yeah, so but I couldn't remember either. But yeah, so now that moment is now stuck in my head, so I can remember that it's SDK NG now. But yeah, that'll be super exciting. Or do we have a pretty full group for training this time around?
Yeah, I think so. There's a threshold you don't want to go past because it ends up being just like kind of running around with your head cut off. And we've kind of found the nice balance of like a couple dozen people at each training. And I think we'll be in a similar place for this next one.
Awesome. I just saw Dylan's message here. He said when he used to write Angular, everything was prefixed with NG. Nice.
It's the 2.0.
Right. Next generation. Cool. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you wanted to chat about this week, Mike?
No, man, it's always great catching up with you. But I think the big nuggets for Golioth we kind of got out there, and I don't have any other personal news.
Yeah, same here. I think it's a shorter stream this week. I think it might be a factor of us being pretty heads down internally on getting a lot of things done. But I was thinking next week we might have some additional guests on for maybe a celebration of something that may be happening next week. So we can talk about it offline.
Great, let's do it.
Cool. All right. Well, good to chat with you as always. And I know you've got some music stuff coming up, so hope all that goes well, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Dan. You too. I'll see you on the next one.
Awesome. See you, Mike.